This old lady must have wandered off from a nursing home. Laughter broke out the moment she stepped into the tattoo parlor. Her silver hair, worn-out jacket, and old combat boots speckled with dried mud. No one knew her heart was beating with the pulse of an old wound. That night of 11 hours in the eye of the storm, when she drove Guardian 17 against her superior's orders, pulling people one by one from the jaws of drowning, they forgot. The system forgot. The whole country forgot. But that tattoo had never faded in her memory. Only now it was faint on her skin. And today, she didn't need a new tattoo. She only wanted to etch the truth again. Before diving into a story that will keep you glued to the screen, I have a small favor to ask. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you love inspiring stories, and don't forget to leave a comment letting me know where are you watching from and what time is it where you live. It always feels amazing to see the whole world come together just to share a meaningful moment.
Welcome to Veteran Best Stories, where the war ends, but the stories live on. From the foxholes to front porches, we honor the silent battles our veterans still fight. Subscribe and walk with us beyond the battlefield.
This old lady must have wandered off from a nursing home. The voice rang out the moment the tattoo parlor's door swung shut. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make the room erupt in laughter. A burst of youthful, confident, harmless laughter in their eyes, and cruelly silencing to the one who had just walked in. She didn't turn around, didn't ask for clarification, not a single glance of displeasure. She only walked slowly, her old combat boots creaking with each step. Rain and wind clung to her silver hair, seeping into the worn denim of her jacket, frayed at the shoulders. She sat down on a chair by the wall, placing her hands on her thighs like someone accustomed to waiting her whole life. Across the room, the bass from the speakers pulsed lively, and images of tattoos spun on a screen. Dragons, guns, flames, skulls. But what she carried wasn't meant to intimidate or prove individuality. It was the only thing left after they had stripped her of all titles, medals, and even her voice. She rolled up her left sleeve, a slow but deliberate motion. On her wrinkled skin, thin as old paper, a tattoo emerged. Small, and so faded it could be mistaken for an ink smudge. An angled anchor, a seagull's wings spread wide, embracing the steel, and a line of text circling it, illegible, as if time had tried to erase it. A young man raised an eyebrow and chuckled. "Is that a tattoo? Or did you accidentally doodle with a ballpoint pen?" More laughter. But this time, it didn't last long. Something in her silence made the room pause, like a breath caught mid-air. She didn't hide the tattoo, nor did she flaunt it. She simply let it show, the way one might reveal a scar no longer worth concealing. Under the flickering neon light, the ink faded like her memories. But there was something in the way she sat, with her hands still resting calmly on her knees, that made those facing her understand. It wasn't just ink. It was the last thing tethering her to a life that was quietly forgetting her. No one asked what she came to get tattooed. They didn't need to know, because in that moment, most still thought, this is just a lonely old woman, clinging to a rebellious past that never existed. They didn't know that tattoo had accompanied her through 11 hours in the eye of a storm. Didn't know she had piloted a rescue boat through a level 5 gale at night, without signal, without support, without orders. They couldn't see that within those blurred lines of ink, there had once been 27 people, shivering, drenched, alive, clinging to the seagull and anchor she had etched onto her skin like a vow. She had once borne titles, stood beneath a flag, had a military record 3 pages long. But after one night when she chose to save lives instead of following orders, all of that vanished. Only the tattoo remained. Now it too was fading. And today she returned, not to boast, not to defy age, but to re-etch what had once been the truth, before it vanished from her skin, from the memories of those who survived, and from a nation that had forgotten how to bow to silent courage. A cold gust slipped through the crack in the door. Outside, the rain still fell, and then a pair of eyes began to look again. Liam was wiping down his tattoo needles, his hands still stained with a few streaks of black ink, when his gaze froze. Something made him look up, then instinctively step toward her, not out of curiosity, nor exactly out of politeness, but as if his body reacted on instinct to a strange signal his mind hadn't yet named. He leaned down, his eyes narrowed, the space around him blurred, leaving only the wrinkled skin displaying a faded tattoo, an anchor, a seagull's wings, and letters so close to vanishing from this world. Silence spread like ripples after a stone hits water. Every sound around, the music, the chatter, the rain on the porch, suddenly receded, as if someone had flipped a switch. Liam blinked, as if he couldn't believe what he was reading. He whispered softly, unsure if he was speaking to himself or the entire room. "Wait a second. This is the U.S. Coast Guard emblem." No one responded. The young men who had been laughing earlier now seemed frozen. One of them leaned forward, glanced over, and suddenly stopped short. He muttered, as if afraid his voice might shatter something vital. "USCG. San Juan. 27 people. Hurricane Mitch." A few sounds of phones being flipped open broke the quiet. Young fingers searched in silence. Old news articles, blurry photos, scattered fragments of memory pieced together from the internet, like shards of a story history hadn't bothered to preserve whole. Liam still hadn't taken his eyes off that skin. His hand trembled slightly as it traced the lines of ink. There, amidst the folds of time, was a curved inscription, almost illegible. USCG. Sector San Juan. Rescued 27 souls. Octurne 1998. Something tightened in his chest, not from shock, but from the feeling of standing before a living relic, like meeting a witness from a history book that was never printed. No one in the shop moved. No one spoke, but all were silent. The silence didn't come from fear, but from a vague, unnamed reverence. No one knew the full story, but in her eyes, in the way she let her arm rest under so many scrutinizing gazes, there was something that made them Bugan interrupt. The tattoo was no longer a joke. It was a portal. And the woman before them, though she hadn't spoken, hadn't told her story, had opened that portal with her sheer silence. Liam took a deep breath, as if surfacing from the depths of water. A young man with messy hair, sitting by the window, whispered, not looking at anyone, as if recalling something read long ago. "I read once. There was a female officer who piloted a rescue boat through a storm all night. Saved 27 people. The papers called her the Silent Angel, but no name, no picture, just a vague news snippet." Another pause. Then the wind outside howled, carrying the scent of salty rain. No one in the shop knew they had just touched something the system had tried to bury. a testament to courage not recorded in documents, not present at ceremonies, never retold. Only the old ink remained, and a pair of eyes that had witnessed it. And then the story began to veer in a direction no one could have foreseen. Hurricane Mitch swept through the Caribbean in October 1998 like a nameless fury. No one was prepared. Category 5 winds engulfed Puerto Rico, tossing ships like toys. In Sector San Juan, all rescue boats were ordered to turn back immediately. No captain was permitted to set sail. No one was reckless enough to defy their superiors' orders in such a raging storm, except her. Elizabeth Monroe, then a sergeant piloting Guardian 17, a rescue boat, not large, but tenacious. She quietly checked the engine while others were securing the hatches. No one noticed. They thought she was just doing a final cleanup. No one imagined she was preparing to cast off, alone. A distress signal flickered faintly on the radio. A small village south of San Juan, without power, without communication, not yet evacuated. The signal was weak, but steady, like a heartbeat fading away. Elizabeth didn't hesitate. She pulled on a raincoat, donned a cap, stepped onto the boat, and started the engine. No note left behind, no report given, only her steady hands gripping the wheel. The wind lashed her face like blades. Waves as tall as rooftops, white and heavy, crashed down like collapsing walls. Guardian 17 pitched in the dark sea. She stood firm, barefoot, gripping the slippery wooden deck. Each impact jolted the boat, threatening to tear it apart, but she didn't retreat. 11 hours. No lights, no human voices. Only the crackle of the radio and the roar of the waves. She navigated by instinct, by the silent understanding of someone who knew the sea not through reason, but through stillness. She wasn't afraid of death. The only thing that kept her from turning back was the vow she made years ago. Leave no one behind. When the first faint beam of a flashlight glimmered on a rocky outcrop, she knew she had arrived. A group of people huddled under a plastic tarp, clinging to each other as if letting go would mean being swept away by the wind. No dock, no place to anchor, only waves and rocks. She jumped into the water, a rope tied around her waist. The wind whipped her face, but her hands held fast to each shoulder. She guided children, carried an elderly man, supported a mother clutching her child. A newborn girl was placed against her chest, wrapped in her own jacket to preserve the last bit of warmth. On the boat, there were no empty seats. She packed them close, hand in hand, back to back. When Guardian 17 turned around, she knew no one would be waiting to greet them. No one would take note. And indeed, when the boat docked at dawn, the harbor held only a few stunned gazes. No questions, no press, only a closed-door meeting that afternoon. Elizabeth said nothing, not a word of justification. When her superiors asked why, she answered simply, "Because I heard the sound of people." That response had no place in a military report, and so it was buried at the bottom. Her name didn't make the morning news. No medals were awarded, only an internal note, insubordination. And Guardian 17 was sent to storage, never mentioned in any meeting again. She returned, alone. No one called her a hero. But that night, 27 people were alive. One of them, the newborn girl, would later become a doctor. And she, Elizabeth, kept only a faded tattoo to remind herself, and so that if anyone still remembered, they might find the truth in those lines of ink. And from then on, she lived on, not needing anyone's recognition, only needing to keep the vow no one had witnessed. Dear audience, take a moment to relax or grab a glass of water, then keep listening to the story. There are still surprising twists ahead. Comment 1 if you're enjoying the story, so we know you're still with us. When Guardian 17 docked that morning, Elizabeth Monroe didn't expect anyone to wave in welcome. Nor did she need applause, for her hands were holding on to life itself. 27 people, wet, exhausted but alive, were helped down from the deck. They didn't know her name. They only knew a woman had driven through the storm to keep a vow no one had heard. But in that morning's news, there was no mention of Guardian 17, no mention of the rescue, no number 27, just a few lines about infrastructure damage and a warning to strictly follow disaster protocols. That afternoon, she was summoned to a meeting. A white room, door closed, no signage. 3 men in high-ranking uniforms sat behind a long table. Before them was a thin file. Her name was on top, next to the words, "Command Violation." No one spoke of gratitude. No one asked how many lives she had saved. No one mentioned the newborn sleeping soundly in her mother's arms, warmed by the jacket Elizabeth had given up. There was only one question, cold and curt. Why did you disobey orders? She sat straight, hands resting on her thighs. No anger, no fear. Her voice was soft but clear. I'd rather face discipline than let them drown. The file was closed. A disciplinary order was placed on the table. All details related to the incident were sealed. An internal memo forbade involved personnel from disclosing anything. Guardian 17 was erased from the day's operational records. The people she saved were barred from speaking to the press. The truth was buried, neatly, like a piece of paper folded and tucked into a locked drawer. Elizabeth didn't resist. She signed the document, not out of regret, but because she understood she was stepping out of the system she had served for over 20 years. She turned in her badge, turned in her uniform. But the tattoo on her arm, no one could take that. After that day, she left the service. No farewell ceremony, no commendations. She moved to a small house on the outskirts of a coastal city, lived quietly, grew vegetables, brewed tea, read books. No one knew she had been a sergeant. No one knew who she had saved. To her neighbors, she was just an old lady who walked to the shore every morning, held a steaming cup of tea, and sometimes sat motionless for a long time when the wind picked up. She didn't tell the story, not once. No memoirs, no appeals. Never mentioned the name of the boat or the faces she had helped onto the deck in the dark of night. Only the tattoo remained, the one thing she kept for herself. Each year, the ink faded a little more, like memories washed away by the sea. But she never covered it, never redid it, never changed it. To her, it wasn't a symbol. It was a relic, a monument not carved in stone, but in flesh. In her small kitchen, a single photo hung on the wall. It didn't show her face. Just Guardian 17, amidst towering waves, taken from afar, blurry, as if the lens itself trembled in the wind. Beneath it was a handwritten note, 27 souls, one night, no witness. And from then on, she no longer existed in reports, but remained in her own silence. Liam couldn't sleep that night. Though he had closed the shop earlier than usual, meticulously cleaned each ink cartridge, turned off the lights, and locked the door carefully. His mind was still reeling with the faded tattoo on the silver-haired woman's arm. There was something about it, about her, that wouldn't let him go. He sat in front of his screen, replaying the video he had unintentionally recorded when she sat still, revealing the blurred tattoo. His fingers lightly scrolled through each frame, pausing at the faint inscription, USCG. Sector San Juan. Rescued 27 souls. Octurn 1998. Each word emerged like an echo from the depths of the sea, a call from something long buried. No edits, no effects, just a simple caption. Met an old lady at the tattoo shop, and I realized I was standing before a forgotten legend. He hit post, 9 o'clock at night. By 10, the video had 30,000 views. By midnight, 100,000. When Liam woke up at 7 in the morning, the number was 1.7 million, and it was still climbing every minute. Comments flooded in like a tidal wave, not the sensational reactions typically seen, but a silence that turned to respect, a shock that morphed into understanding. Someone wrote, "I'm the son of a Hurricane Mitch survivor. My mother still keeps an old photo of a small boat and a woman in a man's jacket. She called her the Nameless Angel." Another account, "I'm a Navy veteran. We heard about Guardian 17 in a closed briefing. No one dared speak of it. Now we can." Each share was a piece of the puzzle. Each message was a streak of light illuminating the shape of someone who had been obscured. Some sent photos. Others shared scans of old letters. Some recounted childhood memories of their mother mentioning a woman who came from the sea, appearing and vanishing like a wave. Within 24 hours, the video hit 8 million views. The news began revisiting the 1998 hurricane. Old reports were dug up. Independent journalists traced sealed records. A retired officer, speaking anonymously, confirmed the existence of Guardian 17. A reporter in Florida found a copy of an internal memo with the words "insubordination" next to Elizabeth Monroe's name. Liam didn't know what to do with all of it. He had only posted a video, said a simple sentence, never imagining he was reopening a file sealed for over 20 years. But as he read the messages of gratitude, not for him, but for her, he knew he had done the right thing. She, meanwhile, remained unaware. In her small seaside house, Elizabeth still woke early, walked along the sandy shore, brewed tea, read the paper. But now, each day brought a letter to the wooden mailbox by her gate. A bouquet gently placed on her doorstep, a handwritten note. "Thank you for saving my grandmother." And one unannounced afternoon, a young woman knocked on her door. In her hand was a blurry photo. In it was Elizabeth, younger, standing on the small boat. Behind her, wind and waves. The young woman spoke with a trembling voice. "My mother always said, if I ever met you, to hug you for her. Now I can." Elizabeth didn't speak. She only opened her arms. And from that moment, the story that seemed lost began to live again. Through each share, each memory, each thank you left unsaid. It was a chilly morning in Washington, D.C., when people quietly began gathering at the plaza in front of the Marine Corps War Memorial. A small wooden podium was set up, modest and unadorned. No red ribbons, no enthusiastic applause. Only those who had read, remembered, known, and owed a word of gratitude. Elizabeth Monroe stepped onto the stage in the same old shoes that had weathered over 30 winters. Her denim jacket was the one she wore during that stormy night in 1998, worn at the shoulders, faded but neatly pressed. She wore no medals. On her chest, only the tattoo, retraced just days before. Guardian 17. 27 souls, still afloat. Beside her stood a young woman, her dark hair neatly tied back, wearing a white doctor's blouse. Her face was wet with tears, her hands clinging to Elizabeth's without letting go. She was the newborn from that night, the baby wrapped in a soldier's jacket, warmed by rough hands and steady breaths. She had grown up hearing her mother's stories of a nameless woman who gave life back with her own at stake. Today, she stood there to embrace that woman with her own arms. Elizabeth didn't cry. Her gaze drifted far away, not to the stands, not to the flags, but to memories returning like the waves of old. At the podium, General Langston, a former Coast Guard commander, slowly flipped through a few pages of notes, then looked up. His voice needed no microphone to carry. There are missions that go unrecorded. There are people who save lives without orders. There are vows written only in wind and water, but they endure longer than any document. No cheers rang out, only tearful eyes and a few hats placed over hearts. The ceremony was brief, but after that day, the Department of Defense officially declassified some records related to Guardian 17. Elizabeth Monroe's name was entered into the U.S. Coast Guard's honor roll, late, but enough to no longer be forgotten. No bronze statues were raised, but in Florida, a rescue station was renamed Monroe Station. In Puerto Rico, a road near the sea was rechristened Guardian Way, and at sea, a new patrol vessel was launched, named USCG Elizabeth M. At her home, the old photo was reframed. Beneath it, a new inscription: for 27 lives, for one vow, forever afloat. She lived 6 more years after that ceremony, still walking to the shore each morning, still brewing tea and watering plants, but the letters grew more frequent. Each day, someone new wrote about her. Schools taught about the 1998 hurricane and the nameless soldier. Radio stations replayed General Langston's speech every Veterans Day. When she passed, no news outlets reported it. But a young veteran filmed her funeral and posted it. No words, just a clip of her being laid to rest, the flag folded, and the sound of waves lapping the shore. That video alone garnered 6 million views. And so, a woman once erased now lives on, not through the call of her name, but through the quiet presence in every heart that remembers with gratitude. Some don't need their names remembered to be heroes. Some deeds, unrecorded in history, live on in the hearts of those saved. And some vows, though unwitnessed, echo through generations, like the quiet sound of waves touching the shore. Elizabeth Monroe's story reminds us that true honor lies not in medals, but in the silence of one who kept a promise when no one saw, no one praised, no one recorded. If you've ever felt forgotten, remember, your silence still holds value. And sometimes just one person keeping their word is enough to change a part of the world. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's always exciting to see people joining us from all over the world. Comment 1 if you found the story inspiring, so we can keep bringing you more meaningful stories.